it was sort of ticking away in the back of my mind that one day I'd really love to have my stories made into an animation like that. So I just decided that I'd try and make it happen myself. And so I started making small animations just with a free stop motion app that I downloaded. And it was just amazing to see them come to life. And I thought, well, if I can do these, I can probably animate Mr. Bear's Christmas because it's not that big of a story. And naively, in my mind, I thought, well, this is not going to be that big of a project. But I was quite wrong with that. To get Mr. Bear's Christmas done, I need all of the characters, which would be quite expensive to get them all done with the wire armature that I needed to make them stay in place to animate. So I thought that was a big hurdle. But then chatting with a friend who actually works with wool, she was convinced that I could needle felt. I wasn't so convinced myself, but I read the book about how to have a go and I just started poking some wool and actually it was achievable. So I made a squirrel to start off with and it actually worked out pretty well. So I thought, right, well, this actually could be done. I set about needle felting the rest of the characters. It took about a month to bring them all to life. So once I'd got all of the characters, the next thing I needed to think about was how to actually make a set, and that was where the project really leapt and grew arms and legs, so to speak. So I just ended up making everything out of wool and just needle felting this whole set. I took up a room in my parents' house, which was unbelievably kind of them to let me do that. And they were really patient with that. I had a message from somebody that lives locally who knew, well, he lived next door to an animator. So he put us in touch and we had a coffee. And it was amazing to meet him and just pick his brains, and he'd worked on loads of things that I'd watched. So it was really interesting hearing him talk about his job. And he specialised in lighting, so I asked him loads of questions about that, and I basically grabbed loads of lamps from around the house and it looked okay, but the shadows were falling in funny places, and I picked his brains about how to fix that. And he really kindly offered to come and light it for me and brought his lights from his house, and that was just amazing. That was such a stroke of luck, which I'm really, really thankful for, and it really lifted and made everything look a lot smarter and more, it got the warmth of Mr. Bear's house, and the way he lit the forest was amazing as well. The only downside of having used the foam, it worked really well for pinning everything to it, but it did mean that things were wobbly, and I had been advised to be careful with stuff being really well pinned down and tripods being pinned down. After a few days shooting, I could see why. And as I played stuff back, just where I'd moved stuff and the ground kind of wobbled, Mr. Bear's table wobbled, there was quite a lot of movement. And I think I quite like to get stuff done as well as I can do. I had to sort of step back a little bit and just accept that this was new to me, and it was a learning curve, and just be okay with some hiccups in there, and hope that it adds to a bit of charm of it. But I think if I did it again, I would definitely find a way to make it more secure so that movement wasn't happening when I moved Mr. Bear or Mouse or whoever on set. But I definitely learned as I went along, and it was a fun learning curve, but definitely a lot to think through. The hardest thing for me, I think, was sort of working with self-doubt on my shoulder all the time, and those days where it feels massive what you're trying to do and not having a clue what you're doing. It was like you're kind of wrangling with yourself. You know that you need to crack on and just have a go, but you're sort of blinded by the overwhelm of what you're trying to do. So I think that was quite tough. Just some days I'd just make myself go in the room and just do it. And it would take, a few hours to get set up. But once I got going, once I got into it, it all just came together and it became a lot more fun. So yeah, the first Mr. Bear prototype that I had was really, really light. So I couldn't, if I lifted his arm, it would just go blop. So I had to put some wire in there to hold it all together. But I thought I'd have a go at weighting it as well. So I got some baking beans and filled Mr. Bear with sort of ceramic weighted beans. which I thought would help, that he would probably stand up more, but it actually didn't really work, and he loves to fall over all the time. So that meant quite a few pins going through his feet. And actually, I'd also had some batteries for some of the lighting, and I used to just pop a Duracell battery just behind him as much as I could get him out of scene as possible. There was a lot of time spent sort of doubled over, just holding him in a certain position, just praying that he'd stand up as I let go. Sometimes he'd just face plant and I'd have to start again. But Mouse was a lot easier, like just very cooperative, and I could pin Mouse really easily. Putting up the Christmas tree was one of the trickier ones to film, as was moving through the forest. Mr. Badger was very similar as well, also liked to fall over a lot. So yeah, some of the ones where there were multiple animals at once, that would just take, I think I spent about 3 hours on about 8 seconds of film, just holding them, praying that they'd stay, and then taking the picture and then going back again, and that definitely took a lot of patience. And again, much like the lighting, I had a really lucky connection as I was chatting to somebody who knew someone who composes and lectures in composition, who was really interested in helping me out. So it was just such a chance connection, and I'm so grateful for that. So that's been really cool, just getting it. I've only had snippets of music so far, but it's just amazing dropping it into the film and hearing it come alive. And so I feel so lucky that that's happened as well. I needle felted some tiny lanterns for the animals coming through the forest, and that was a bit of a challenge as well. So I managed, with the help of my dad, to solder some little mini light bulbs and wire them in. And then I managed to wire them into the characters and kind of needle felt them into their arms. So that was quite complicated, as was. I then had to kind of wire down into the snow and then underneath and connect it to the transformer. So every time I moved them, it kind of tugged at the set quite a bit. And that was really fiddly and quite dodgy wiring by me. But I don't think I'll make an electrician, but I managed to hook it all up, and it did work out. But yeah, that was really fiddly, but the tiny light bulbs looked absolutely perfect. So I think like the biggest hurdle was definitely getting the set pulled together and trying to get that all right. But once it was all in place, it felt really cool to actually start shooting with it. It was fun. So one of the tips that the lighting guy gave to me, Dan, he said it would be good to black out the room that I'm working in, and I'm thinking, right, I'm using a room at my parents' house, which they've been very generous and understanding about already. So then I had to go and ask for permission to black out the windows as well, which again, they were very understanding about. But it was quite a pain to do. So I went for bin bags and double-sided sticky tape, and that held for a bit, but I was doing it in the summer, and every time the windows heated up, it all just peeled off. So I'd sort of be going into this room ready to start, and I'd just sort of sigh every time I walked in and all the stuff had dropped off the windows. I had to start again and put it all back up, which sort of just got really frustrating, but it really did help actually having that constant light, and it was worth doing it. Most of the time I just worked in something comfy like my pajamas or whatever, and then I could just kind of squeeze around in this tiny space, but it worked out fine. I think I could do it again with that space I had. Yeah, would I do it again? It's something that I've been pondering, I think, because it has been such a big challenge. It's been like so much to learn, which is quite an uncomfortable process. So it has been a really rewarding but also quite a difficult process. And I've loved the outcome. So I don't know at this stage whether I would do another story, but I am pondering it. So there's 2 more Mr. Bear stories in the series. There's Mr. Bear's Best Day and Mr. Bear's Day Out, and it would be really fun. I keep coming back to making the carousel for Mr. Bear's Day Out with the unicorns and the teacups, and I think that would be really fun to see that come to life. Yeah, never say never. I will definitely ponder that.